Welcome to The Debate. Today we're diving into something really hitting home here in Toledo. There's been a lot of investor attention, specifically in real estate, and it brings up a pretty critical question for folks who've lived here their whole lives.
Right. The question we're tackling is this. Do these real estate investment trusts, investments, REITs, in residential properties actually end up helping or hurting lifelong Toledo residents?
Exactly. So I'll be making the case that these investments bring some really necessary economic benefits.
And I'll be looking at the other side, highlighting the potential detrimental effects these investments might have on our community fabric.
Okay, so from my perspective, you just can't ignore the sheer scale of capital that REITs pump into Ohio's economy. I mean, take Welltower, headquartered right here in Toledo. They alone have about $39.06 billion in total property value within Ohio. And they've paid something like $430 million in property taxes across the state. That's a huge number, $39 billion. It really shows the massive scale we're talking about. And that money, it bolsters public services. Plus, crucially, it provides rental housing supply. We have really low vacancy rates here, around what, 2.25%? So adding housing stock, it supports growth and increases housing options overall.
Yeah, I hear you on the capital, but I come at it from a different angle. Because this rapid influx of REITs and, frankly, out-of-state investors, like this Ricarian VPC Ohio SFR Portfolio LLC, which seems designed just to snap up single-family homes for rentals.
Right.
And it's making homeownership incredibly difficult for lifelong Toledo residents. I mean, your average local buyer, they're probably using traditional financing. They just can't compete with these all-cash offers from investors. And, this directly leads to more absentee landlords, people who aren't here, who don't have that same immediate stake.
Okay, but...
And what often happens? Neglected properties, you see more blight, neighborhood issues just don't get addressed, and that directly, degrades the quality of life for people who've built their lives here.
Look, I see why you think that, and I understand the frustration about local opportunities. But let me offer a different perspective here. These bigger investments, they often tackle some really sticky financial problems for the city, like paying off significant chunks of delinquent property taxes. We're talking about $116.1 million owed in Lucas County alone. Getting that paid down stabilizes the local tax base, right? Which helps everyone through better services. And, the professional property management that usually comes with these larger investment groups, it often means properties are maintained, maybe even better than before in some cases. It contributes to a more consistent and managed rental housing stock. It's not always a negative.
I'm sorry, I just don't buy that narrative completely. Because, well, yes, some taxes eventually get paid. If you dig a little deeper, these outside investors, right, they own less than 5% of the properties in the county, but they account for over 15% of the total delinquent taxes. That's not just a number. It suggests a pattern.
But what's the pattern suggesting?
It suggests that some of these big players, maybe they're strategically delaying payments, maybe using loopholes. It kind of undermines the whole stabilizing the tax base argument if they're contributing disproportionately to the delinquency problem while benefiting from the market.
Okay, I appreciate that distinction, and that statistic about the delinquencies is it's definitely worth noting. But we also have to consider the context, right? A lot of these properties, they were already deeply tax delinquent before these investors bought them. So while, maybe some new delinquencies accrue, the initial purchase still often brings these long-neglected properties back onto the tax rolls, eventually. It contributes towards recovering that $116 million, rather than just creating new problems. I mean, the alternative is often these places just sit vacant, racking up more debt, and dragging neighborhoods down.
With all due respect, I find that hard to square with the on-the-ground realities for many residents. My concern isn't just whether a property is, minimally maintained. It's about who's really benefiting here and at what cost to the community. These management companies, they're often driven by algorithms, right? Prioritizing shareholder returns over maybe community well-being. And that leads to things like these huge rent hikes you mentioned, the $175 average jump to $1,100 in just 1 year.
Well, markets fluctuate.
But this isn't just market fluctuation. It shows how technology used by these trusts can kind of decouple rents from what local people can actually afford. It forces many residents to spend way over 30% of their income on housing, which is, the threshold for being cost burdened. And then there's the risk, the very real risk of a bubble. What happens if these investors suddenly pull out? We could be left with another wave of vacant properties and economic instability all over again.
Look, the economic benefits, the capital injection, the role in providing some kind of housing supply, those aspects from REIT investments are, I think, undeniable. They support public services through taxes, eventually, and they offer a certain resilience in the market, even when the broader economy shifts. Their scale can provide a kind of stability.
I'm just not convinced that's the whole picture, or even the main part of it. My read of the evidence suggests these investments primarily boost investor returns, and often that comes at the direct expense of local homeownership dreams, neighborhood quality, and crucially, rental affordability for the lifelong residents of Toledo.
So it's clear there are strong arguments on both sides. The interplay between this kind of financial investment and the real-world community impact here in Toledo is definitely complex.
Yeah, absolutely. It leaves a lot to think about, and perhaps for our listeners to explore further in the source material.